Hello everyone, this is Troy from Hello Rabbit Studio. Welcome back to Get Good. I'm not quite there yet, so today I'll be drawing Amon from Avatar, The Legend of Korra. Now, a few things to clear up before I get started. This is more of an original piece than last time. There is no particular drawing that I'm copying from. I'm just using Amon's design as a reference and going along as I will. So the narrative will be a lot more scattered because that's how the drawing process went, very scattered. Let me just start off by saying that Amon is an amazing character. I don't think the show necessarily did everything that they could have with his character, but from a visual standpoint, he's amazing. I'm just hoping that I did him justice in this particular drawing. So, because it's not directly replicating anything, any particular image, I really had to focus on developing the pose as I went along. So that meant starting off with a really baseline sketch, moving on to fleshing out the details around that sketch with like, okay, so his hood needs to go here, this is how the folds within the clothing would go, and then gradually moving on to the part that you see right now, which is the detailing part. That's like lesson number one here, to make revisions. And in this case, it's through Photoshop's abilities, making the most of Photoshop and making previous sketches opaque on other layers in order for them to act as guides. That really helps me out. It really benefits me as the guy that's trying to make this all happen. So one of the key things was really trying not to get attached to anything, because as you see here, what looked good when I was trying to sketch it out didn't look good closer up. And that's going to come up quite a few times in this little process. You can be pretty sure of that, because again, without a guide, without something to copy, there are going to be mistakes. Just have to be okay with that. So you might have noticed a little bit before, I know it's going by pretty quickly, but the knee guards were out of position, so I had to kind of scrap the original position and find a better alignment for them. In this case, his fingers weren't quite right, so I decided, well, the guide's there, but I think I'd prefer to see them in a different way. I'm going to erase things, lots of erasing, lots of redrawing, but that's all alright. What I draw now will change, and kind of have to be okay with that. It gets you past bad times, but it also keeps you from being overconfident in good times, because your perception will change no matter what. Yeah. So that brings us to the second point that I wanted to talk about, actually. I really want to learn my lesson. I really do with this series. So in the last video, I drew Spider-Man, and I learned a lot from doing so. But Spider-Man and Amon are really different, so it's not like I can just drag and drop the things that I learned from drawing Spider-Man into this process of drawing Amon. For example, Spider-Man seemed to be obsessed with latex, skin-tight latex, shiny skin-tight latex. That's great for Spider-Man, but for Amon, he's wearing leather and cloth primarily. So I can't really use the same shading techniques, I can't really use much of the same things at all when it comes to that. If I were to use the same shading techniques, then his cloth, Amon's cloth, his clothing would be shiny, and that really makes no sense. Anyways, that brings me to the conclusion of this particular lesson, is that if you really want to learn something, it means that you have to learn it in a way that won't be good for just that particular situation. That specific situation that you learn it from isn't going to come up every single time. So you have to be able to adapt it. And that's what I'm going to be doing here. I learned from doing the Spider-Man drawing that my line weight was light and not very impactful in a lot of ways. So I do my best to try and give a little bit more weight to the drawings I'm doing in this piece. I still fall prey to the same problems where I'm zoomed in and I think it's bold, but on further inspection, when I zoom out and really take a look at it, it's not. And you'll see my process will gradually take me there again. I haven't quite learned my lesson yet, but I'm starting to. Anyways, I'm gonna stop there for a second and say that again, Amon's design is awesome. These leather straps that go on his legs and on his gauntlets there and also around his neck, but I kind of missed that detail. Again, I'm getting caught up in just drawing. They're just awesome. Who would have thought of that? Just having these little like leather straps come down, not horizontally, but kind of at a diagonal angle, and it gives him a very streamlined look when you're just looking at him standing even straight and still. Great. Okay, here's where I learned my lesson. Yeah, I finally see that the line weight is still very light, and decide to go over things. So one of the inspirations for this process was Chinese calligraphy, and if you don't know anything about Chinese calligraphy, you should know this. When the person that's doing the calligraphy starts off his stroke with his brush, and the brush makes contact with the page, there's a big, thick kind of like impact. But it trails off as he moves towards the end of his stroke. So it starts thick, but ends off trailing off into a lighter stroke. So it gives a little bit of like movement in that way. I try to keep that in mind. It doesn't really come across too much in this piece, this drawing of Amon, but I try to keep it in mind so I get at least a little bit of that motion comes across in the line weight. And it brings me to another lesson, which was balancing micro versus macro. It was really important, really important to keep on going up in terms of the zoom level and down into the detail level. I think this is a problem that actually is compounded by using a tablet. If I was drawing on paper, I don't think I would have had as much of a problem. You don't zoom in on paper. You look at it, you might look closer at a certain detail and you might focus down a little bit harder, but you don't get the same, I'm only looking at a piece of this, as you would with a tablet. As you can see there, I made a very significant change to Amon's head. And the reason I did that is because when I really looked at the bigger picture, his head was huge. It was really huge compared to the rest of his body, and I never ever even saw that when I was just working on his body. And also here, when I'm shading his arm, I get a little bit overzealous, and I start shading really intensely. And it didn't make any sense when I zoomed out. It zoomed in, it looked good, but zoomed out, it just seemed like he suddenly had this huge shadow under his arm that just came out of nowhere. So I had to kind of get rid of that, step back a bit, and balance the micro versus the macro. Can I just say for a second that Amon's design is, again, awesome. Not just from how he looks, but how he moves. In the animated series, they gave him such an interesting fighting style. Like, if you know anything about the Avatar series, you know that there's earth bending, there's water bending, there's fire bending, and there's air bending. And, I guess, energy bending. That kind of ruined the series for me in a way. I mean, going back, it was alright. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. Anyways, so Amon's fighting style doesn't have anything to do with bending. I'm not going to go into any spoilers or anything, but yeah, he fights just purely through martial artistry and being a master of just physical assaults. So that gives Amon amazing body movements. And I hope I captured it here, in that Amon's using his body to really drive forward like a brutal attack, a very efficient attack. So he's driving his foot down into the ground, transferring force up through his body and out through his attacking hand, which is actually ending at a point where his fingers extend out almost like a spear. It's awesome, and it's all in one motion, in one movement, in one direction, and it's all very efficient looking. Now that's again one of the problems that I had in my previous drawing of Spider-Man, where the goal was to make it look like Spider-Man was in mid-swing. Joey Vasquez had that in his original piece, but I wasn't quite able to capture it. In this particular piece, with me drawing him on, I wanted to at least get some of it coming out, some of that motion, some of that movement coming out through his pose. Hopefully I got a little bit of it. Maybe not. Anyways, this commentary is actually fairly uncertain, just like the drawing process was. So this is a problem that I kind of have, not just with drawing. But let's take a look at the example. As you can see here, I'm working on shading, using dark colors. Again, like I said in the Spider-Man video, using dark colors is intimidating for me. And as you can see here, I am going over and over and just trying to figure out, well, what would look good? What would be right in this particular situation? What would give Amon's foot depth? What would make it appear like it's being shadowed, being hit by light, but not being overwhelmed by it? And I really don't know. I really was unsure about myself throughout this process. And you know what? That's okay. I used really tight cross-hatching, and when I was doing it, I thought, man, this is a lot messier looking than the shading on Spider-Man looked. And it's all uncertain at first, but then I thought a little bit deeper about it and thought, well, yeah, Amon's wearing different clothing. That tight cross-hatching might be more indicative of like a really close weave that you see on textiles. And that might be alright. You can see me just making some attempts to draw maybe his ankle and stuff and just erasing it because it just doesn't look right. And then again, it's all okay. You know, because it's uncertain, because everything in life is kind of uncertain. I don't want to get too philosophical about this, but it kind of is important. Not wanting to make a mistake can really limit you, as it can with anything. You know, Winston Churchill apparently said the following, that success is never final, failure is never fatal, and courage is what matters. So really, you know, if you get yourself stuck because something comes up, whether it's good or bad, it's really a disservice to yourself. You know, you got to keep moving forward and trying new things, or else you're always going to be stuck doing the same things, which is worse by far. So yeah, I try new things here, specifically working on believability rather than realism. So, for example, as you can see with his leg, where it connects from the calf to the thigh, I'm using white lines. White lines don't really exist unless light is shining at you, bright and blazing in real life. But in this case, I wanted to make sure that the details weren't obscured by the shading. For example, his belt would have disappeared into his tunic, which would have disappeared into his pants if I had just used black and used it realistically. So a white line makes the details clear while still allowing you to see the shading, which is great. It's not necessarily realistic, but it's believable in some small fashion or another. So that leads me to thinking things through. You know, you kind of have to experiment, and experiments really lead you to some kind of result, whether it's good or bad. Amon's example is, again, a great example of thoughtfulness. And I'm going to go on a tangent here, so warning. Avatar, The Legend of Korra, is set in a very distinct kind of world. The old world is giving way to the new in a clashing sort of way, where just like the Industrial Revolution in our real world, the rise of technology is kind of rapid, and it's changing everything. Suddenly there are cars and planes and all kinds of stuff, and it's an awesome setting. And Amon embodies this setting. The shoulder, wrists, and leg guards, as you can see, are all kind of like an old world warrior, stylistically. But then you look at his chest, right here, and you see that he's not just wearing like robes, he's wearing a tunic with like a breasted front with buttons. And you know, just underneath his hood, he's wearing a collar. It's just this amazing blend. Every single element in his design ties together well with other elements in his design while staying muted enough so that his mask takes the focal point, like the attention of the viewer. It's awesome, and he will be remembered because of that. So when it comes to lessons, this is just more of a carry it forward than an implement it now sort of thing, that thinking things through is really important. You know, when I start making original series and stuff like that, I really want to be just as thoughtful. Anyways, that brings me to kind of the conclusion of the drawing process. Here's the end result of the entire 5 to 6 hour process. Oh, it took forever. It was mostly me just poring over and thinking, that would be alright. No, maybe not. Maybe I should just try it, and then finally putting pen to the tablet. Anyways, here is how it looks in the end. I think I'm satisfied with it, and that really is what defines when a piece of art is done or not, when it's an original piece, is when you think it's done. If you guys see anything that you'd like to comment on, please do in the comment section below, and I will probably respond. I really love it when you guys tell me what you guys think. Critical or not, I don't care, just let me know what you guys think. I want to improve. This is Troy from Hello Rabbit Studio, signing off. Thank you very much for watching.